This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
NFL week number 6 is my least favorite kind of slate, just being honest with all of you, because we've got a lot of wind on this slate and a lot of injuries to very fun players. So it's a bummer in that regard, but it does potentially leave open some possibilities where we can find some value in player props. That's why JJ Zachariason is here for today to break down player props across week 6. Later on, Rob Friedman will swing by to break down the NLCS and ALCS from a pitching perspective, and I'll talk NASCAR in Las Vegas to round things out. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research. Joined here to kick things off by JJ Zachariason. Check him out on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Find his work at LateRound.com and on the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. JJ, week 6 is coming up. How you doing today?
Doing better than Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, so that's good. Feeling better than them.
So they're releasing Frank Clark this morning. Mm-hmm. Like, I can understand Sean Payton coming in and cleaning house from like guys who were there from the previous regime. He signed Frank Clark like a couple months ago.
Right.
And like, how did we get here this fast?
Yeah, it's rough, but I can't say that I hate it.
It's kind of a bummer because I've always liked Sean Payton. It's just wild to see this teardown occurring for guys that he brought in, like himself. It's nuts.
It's a very down bad team, and it's a very unlikable team. Like the whole, like, Russ and his persona that he's taken on has just been not very likable, like objectively, right? And then like you get the stuff last night with Jerry Jeudy, right? And Jerry Judy's probably not gonna be a Bronco for much longer. But look, like, I feel you, Jerry Jeudy, because I felt the Steve Smith wrath.
Sure.
Personally,
you've been there.
Literally personally, after being on a podcast where the person that I was on the podcast with was trashing Cooper Kupp when he came out as a prospect. Right. I was just on there saying, hey, by the way, Steve Smith said that Cooper Kupp was his number 1 prospect in this class. And then the person that I was on the show with decided to say, Steve Smith's an idiot, and go in on Steve Smith, which it was not me, but I was in the
you were in the crossfire.
Yes, I was in the crossfire of the Steve Smith trash talking. You don't want to be a part of that.
But like, it was art. The way that Steve Smith was like, I hope he does great. I in the past have said he's a first round receiver with no talent, just a guy. And then like he's saying it in a way where he still thinks that. And like, it was art. Like he is perfected trash talking, even though he's not in the league anymore. And like, it's perfect.
Yeah, and then Jeudy comes out and he was horrible last night. Like, just very, very bad game last night.
I used him in single game DFS. It was awesome. Huge fan of him being horrible and sinking that roster. But oh well. We're gonna talk about week 6 player props with JJ here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Coming up later on today, Tom Vecchio will break down Sunday Night Football. Gonna need some props in that game to make it fun between the Bills and the Giants. Primetime Tom will be up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed and FanDuel TV Plus later on today. To get FanDuel TV Plus, go to FanDuel.com/watch or download FanDuel TV Plus on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku devices. Now, JJ, before we dive into some actual player props, I want to talk to you about process, because on the DFS side of things this week, wind is a big consideration because there is high wind in a lot of games that are outdoors, and that's a tough thing because it does downgrade guys. How do you navigate wind when you're looking at player props specifically?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of research done by people that are smarter than me. You've done research. Chris Allen has done research at Fantasy Life. And essentially when you get into that 15 mile an hour range with winds, you start to get a little bit more concerned. And then when you get to like 20 mile an hour plus sustained winds, that's when you really should be concerned. So, the way that people look at this, though, is that they downgrade passing attacks, which is natural to do that. And then naturally they say, okay, if the passing attack is downgraded, I'm just going to go after the running backs because they're probably going to lean on the run a little bit more. The problem with that is, the rushing totals might be semi unaffected. They might not be as efficient per se, but they'll get more volume. Let's say. But the issue with that is scoring. When passing attacks are bad in general across the league and really in any sort of football environment, when a passing attack is bad, that's the way the teams move the ball down the field, and that's going to impact scoring opportunities for that team. So keep that in mind. So you might want to maintain rushing numbers. That's totally fine. But if you're looking at a running back who's in one of these games, maybe don't go after their touchdown totals or anytime touchdown or something like that. It's just, to me, not worth it because the offense probably won't be moving the ball as well. And then downgrade the passers, downgrade the pass catchers. But a lot of times too, these books are going to at least understand it to some degree, and they're going to account for it to some degree. On the DFS end, where you're playing against other people, that's probably where there's more of an advantage.
Right. And like you do see totals go down as wind goes up, and like that does impact anytime touchdown numbers. But at least for this week, my numbers still show value on the unders for a lot of those games, except for Browns 49ers likes the over a lot, in large part because 49ers are insane. But like the other unders are still values. So I agree with you where the anytime touchdown numbers are the big takeaway from a prop betting perspective, where you want to be pretty skeptical there and make sure it's a good value before plunging into those waters. Now, the other bummer about this week is that we got a lot of high profile guys like Justin Jefferson, Devon Achane going down with injury entering this week. So which fluid situations are you monitoring for week number 6?
Yeah, you could look at the Minnesota situation, with KJ Osborne already playing in 2 wide receiver sets. This is something that we talk about a lot on the show, where you're looking at more of the 11 personnel sets and then seeing this 3 wide sets and seeing how that then is affected when 2 wideouts are on the field. So Jordan Addison would hypothetically get somewhat of a bump, but they are so pass heavy and they run a decent amount of 11 personnel that I don't think that the difference in Jordan Addison's pre and post Justin Jefferson, like I think that there's going to be a higher target share spike for KJ Osborne and Jordan Addison. But in terms of like routes run and such, and then obviously the offense isn't going to be as effective without arguably, if not the best wide receiver in football still on the field. So, I think it's easy to say, oh, these guys are going to get massive, massive bumps. I do think there's somewhat of a bump from a projection standpoint, but don't overstate that because the offense isn't going to be as good. And they were still running a decent number of routes to begin with too. There's a lot of running back injuries though, that I think are really, really important this week. So you mentioned the Miami backfield. Devon Achane is out. He's going to not be playing for a handful of weeks. And you just have a lot of moving parts here. So Raheem Mostert's going to get his. He'll be the RB1 in the offense. If you have him in fantasy, you're playing him in fantasy. He's in a good spot too. They play Carolina, but they play Carolina, and that's important because not only can you run on the Panthers, but there's probably going to be a nice positive game script. And we know that Miami and this Shanahan system will oftentimes split backfields. And so we've seen that already with Mostert and Achane. And so this RB2, whoever the RB2 is, actually might be fairly valuable this week. So you get Jeff Wilson coming off IR. I'm not convinced that he's going to be a full play, like he's going to be 100% in this game. Savon Ahmed's there too. And then there's this rookie Chris Brooks, who's sort of the bigger body guy in that backfield that's been playing special teams so far this year. And so I think a lot of people might look at Brooks last week and say, oh, he played ahead of Savon Ahmed, who was a healthy scratch. But that's really because Brooks plays special teams. Mm-hmm. And so Ahmed would hypothetically be active this week. We'll see. Obviously they could if they're like, hey, we really like Jeff Wilson. We think that he's going to be okay. We're only going to dress 3 running backs like most teams do. And then it's going to be Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, and then Chris Brooks. That's a very real possibility. So keep that in mind with Savon Ahmed. But if they don't feel 100% about Jeff Wilson, I'm expecting Savon Ahmed to be the number 2 back in this offense ahead of a guy like Chris Brooks, because Ahmed did run ahead of Chris Brooks earlier this year when Devon Achane was not ready to showcase his skill set. So that's the way that I'm sort of viewing the Miami backfield right now. There's a handful of other ones. I mean, you got Arizona right now with James Conner out. You got Amari DiMercato, who has basically, last week he stepped in, he played 63% of their running back rushes. He had a 10% target share, but Keontae Ingram was out last week. He's gotten some limited practices in. It sounds like he could be back this week. And, you could read social media and see that people are making a really big deal out of him being the RB1 on their depth chart right now, Keontae Ingram instead of DiMercato, which I'm not that concerned about because the people putting that together are not the coaches necessarily. And so, but DiMercato, at the very least, the reason why I'm semi-optimistic about him is he's been playing third down snaps to begin with in this offense. I mean, he's seen 61% of the Cardinals 2-minute snaps this year, as according to Fantasy Life. So I think that even if, Keontae Ingram is involved in this offense, which I think he will, DiMercato, if you want to look at more like total yardage props, you could hit the over there because I do think he's going to be used as a receiver. You got Miles Sanders banged up. Chuba Hubbard's been better than Miles Sanders, basically with any metric you look at this year. But just understand that in a negative game script against Miami, Hubbard could actually see a lot of receiving work in this offense because they've targeted their running backs at an above average rate. And then the last one, just throw out there, Roschon Johnson. He is not back from concussion protocol. He's still not practicing, even though they had extra time playing Thursday night last week. So if he can't go, then you're looking at the D'Onta Foreman show. And I would honestly say usually maybe look at the under with D'Onta Foreman's receiving work, because he's played a lot of games in the NFL and he's even been the starter in some of these games. He's never hit above a 10% target share in a single game. So he's never been used that heavily as a receiver. The problem is Travis Homer's hurt too. So they have
no one.
They have these three running backs they typically dress, because Homer's sort of their special teams guy, but he's also a receiving threat. So they have these three running backs that usually dress that are all out or hypothetically out this week. So, Darrington Evans would be the other one. And he is a pass catching specialist. Like, he could play that role. But I'm not as inclined to say definitely hit the unders on D'Onta Foreman. I probably would be if Travis Homer were healthy and playing.
Sure.
But because he's banged up, I'm just not as confident in that.
Yeah, and there's weather in Chicago too, so it could be a pretty run-heavy approach. So Foreman probably going to be pretty involved with Roschon Johnson, seeming unlikely to clear protocol by Sunday. Let's take a look at the yardage props for week number 6, JJ. Where are you seeing value there right now?
Yeah, the first one that I really like is Curtis Samuel. His line over on FanDuel is 34.5 receiving yards, and I'm going to go over. He's actually been over 50 receiving yards in 4 or 5 games this year, so I think this line just in general is low. But on top of that, Atlanta's been a really favorable matchup for slot guys and just the middle of the field. They get crushed by tight ends as well, so you might want to look at Logan Thomas. But they've seen the 5th highest rate of targets go to the slot this season. So, and that's where Curtis Samuel plays. So I think Samuel over 34.5 receiving yards is a pretty easy one this week. And then there's also the other guy that I like. This is more on DraftKings because the line is a yard lower. But Tajay Spears right now, his line over there is 15.5 receiving yards. I think on FanDuel it's 16.5 receiving yards. I like the over with that as well. He's seen the 5th highest target share at running back to start the season. He's hit 4 or more targets in 4 or 5 games this year. So let's just assume he gets to 4 targets and what could be a negative game script against Baltimore too. So let's just assume that he gets to 4 targets. In order to get to that number, you need him to hit 4 yards per target. And the average across the NFL this year at running back is 5.4 yards per target. And Tajay Spears is a much more explosive back than a lot of the other running backs in the league. So I like Tajay Spears over 15.5 receiving yards. Honestly, if you want to bet on FanDuel too, I don't mind him over 16.5 receiving yards.
Yes. Always line shop, shop for the best line as always. But that number also pretty appropriate. Minus 114 over 16.5 at FanDuel for Tajay Spears. Touchdown bets, hit another one last week with Zach Ertz, getting in the end zone at plus 310. What you liking for that in week number 6?
Yeah, I think the easiest one to go to this week is Chris Godwin at an anytime touchdown at plus 195. He's yet to score this year, but his touchdown expectation is around 2.5 touchdowns based on how much volume he's seeing, where he's seeing that volume. He's seen a 25% target share per game this year. And then you get Mike Evans banged up. So that could funnel more targets towards Chris Godwin in what could be a negative game script against a good Detroit team. And we know that Detroit is sort of a pass funnel because they can stop the run pretty well. So I really like Chris Godwin to finally get his first touchdown of the season here in week 6. And then if you want to dig deeper, I like to throw out these darts like last week with Jalen Hyatt at plus 800 when he played I think he ran like 9 routes. This one's not as crazy.
He played a lot of snaps still, just the offense sputtered,
Yeah, exactly. This one though is a little bit more reasonable than that. I like Josh Downs at plus 310 anytime touchdown. This is on DraftKings. It's a little bit lower on FanDuel. He's seen a 24% target share when Gardner Minshew's been under center this year. And even across the entire season, Downs has a 21% target share in that offense. And he's a rookie. I mean, it's very, very impressive. Indy gets Jacksonville. That could be a pass-heavy script. Jacksonville's faced the 5th highest pass rate in football this year defensively. So teams are throwing the ball against Jacksonville. From like a slot matchup perspective, it's not amazing. They actually haven't allowed a slot touchdown this year, but they're kind of middle of the road in terms of percentage of targets going to the slot. And that's where Josh Downs is really playing, a lot of his snaps. So I do like him though, just strictly on volume. This is a game where, I don't think that there's as much of a worry about the weather as we might see with some of these other locations. And so, with this potential negative game script against Jacksonville, I think Downs is a really smart play at plus 310.
Yeah, it's part Josh Downs, but I think mostly it's the Gardner Minshew revenge game. Like,
exactly.
You can be honest. It's okay, JJ.
Exactly.
We know that's the secret sauce here. It's the revenge game, and it's okay to admit that. But
exactly.
That is JJ Zachariason. Check him out on Twitter at Late Round QB. Find his work at lateround.com and check out the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast as well. JJ, good luck to you in week 6. We'll talk to you once again next week.
Thanks, Jim.
Alrighty, again, find JJ's podcast by searching for the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. But also coming up on Sunday, it is the beginning of the championship series for 2023 across Major League Baseball. The ALCS is on Sunday. NLCS begins on Monday, so it's time to bring back Rob Friedman. Check him out on Twitter at Pitching Ninja. Find his work on Peacock, MLB on Fox, and of course right here at FanDuel Sportsbook as well. And Rob, kind of a bummer not to get a game 5 out of any of those divisional series, but these championship series set out to be pretty fun. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. A little tired, late night. Yeah, and although the pitch clock, I mean, it's helpful, right? That game would have normally been like over at 1, so we're better off for that.
But for you, when you're trying to chop up these gifts, like, you got to fly. You got to have those fingers nimble, man.
Absolutely. But I'm like in postseason form. I'm feeling it. A little tired, wearing down, but I can see this stretch run. I'm ready.
I love it. Well, we're going to talk today about both the ALCS and the NLCS and try to get your read on those series. And I'm going to force you to make some picks too. We'll get your thoughts on we'll not hold you to it, but we're going to ask you about that. Let's start things off here by talking about the American League side of things. And you talked entering the ALDS about how the Rangers surprised you, the bullpen specifically, with how well they played during the wild card round. And, they got the job done again in the ALDS. So I want to ask you, Rob, larger sample now, 2 pretty tough series against some very good offenses. Have the Rangers done enough to solidify themselves for you, or is there still some room for some rockiness here?
Oh, there's some room for some rockiness. I mean, I think you saw that with Chapman, who's got, overpowering stuff. No doubt one of the, top relievers in baseball history, at least recent history. But still under pressure, that made me nervous watching him. Yeah. Despite throwing 102. So I still have some question marks there. I think they're going to be in better shape if they get some pitching back and can move some arms to the bullpen to shore that up a little bit. But yeah, they've surprised me definitely, but I'm not buying that.
Yeah, I think that like the O's series was kind of like like this is still here. Like they got around it because they're a very good team beyond that. But like, there was some shakiness. And now that offense, that's to face Justin Verlander, likely getting the ball. He is getting the ball in game 1 for the Astros here. And obviously it's not like vintage Verlander right now, but like he's a vet. It seems like he's been able to get the job done despite the fact he's not his old self. So he's been very good. But I want to ask you, Rob, can he maintain that against an offense as good as Texas's can be?
That's a great question. I'm not 100% sure. I think Texas's offense is a nightmare for pitchers. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a tough matchup for him. If anyone could do it, it's him. Obviously, you're seeing a lot of the experience coming through with these guys. You saw that last night too. And, it matters in the playoffs somewhat, knowing that you've been there, knowing how to get out of these situations. But that's a tough matchup for anybody. The Rangers can hit.
It really is. And that's a big part of why, Rob, I actually bet the Rangers to advance in this series. They're plus 126 at FanDuel. I actually have this one. I think I have the Astros at 52% to win the series. So like, it's not a huge value on the Rangers side of things. So I took the plus 126. You are allowed to tell me I'm a dummy if you want to, but who do you have advancing out of the ALCS?
Yeah, I probably have the Astros advancing, but I don't have a strong conviction about it. I don't think that's a dumb bet at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously not. But the Astros, to me, where they separate themselves is if their starting pitching rose to the occasion, and then that bullpen, a lot of experienced arms, really good, really deep, and they can hit too. So
yeah.
That combination is a tough out in any postseason. I give them the edge, but it would not shock me at all, especially if, depending on what the Rangers have with Scherzer and Gray.
Right.
Because then you can rearrange arms. I mean, that's a big swing. to me.
Yeah, Scherzer, a 60 pitch bullpen session earlier on this week. So I'm interpreting that as if he'll play.
I think so too.
Yeah. And like, that'd be a big upgrade because like that rotation, like the pitching staff in general is like, it does give you some concerns. And like, but if they add Scherzer in, like you said, that just kind of changes the equation from a depth perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Nate Eovaldi's proven to be a big time pitcher, big game pitcher. You want him on the bump in any big game. Scherzer's had his ups and downs this year, but you still, again, going with experience, it's hard to, even if you move him to the bullpen. Yeah. I mean, even if you do that, you want to face him.
No, I've watched enough All-Star games, Rob, to know that Scherzer in short spurts is the most terrifying thing. I don't care how old he is. That frightens me so much. Yeah.
So like you can move him around and it just gives you way more flexibility if you can get him there. And that may be the difference maker in this series. But, Houston, you're seeing these guys like the regular season just doesn't matter anymore.
Well, where did that version of Christian Javier come from? I know that he let up some hard contact in that Twins game, but like we hadn't seen that version of Javier like since April, maybe. It had been a long time.
Oh, absolutely. And he looked fantastic. Like, that is what he can do. But you're seeing this over and over again. Like the postseason can surprise you. These guys that maybe struggle. Nola. Nola found it just at the right time. So you have these guys that just step up in the postseason, and it's a thing. There's just every pitch seems to be magnified times 10 of the regular season. Not that the regular season doesn't matter, but this is where the players prove themselves. And you saw that last night was crazy.
Well, it was crazy. You mentioned Aaron Nola. So let's talk about the NLCS right now. And you said going into the divisional series that the Phillies pitching staff was a factor that could keep them in the mix against the Braves. And the pitching staff was great, Rob, but that offense was nuts. And it's not just like motivation stuff. Like they're just a good offense. Now they're facing Arizona. So I want to ask you, how does Arizona's pitching staff match up against a Phillies offense that is in full stride right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really rough matchup for any pitching staff. Diamondback starters are really good. Obviously, Zach Gallen knows what he's doing. He's been in pressure situations, and he's a guy that you can count on. Merrill Kelly, same thing. The bullpen has surprised me. Like, especially Kevin Ginkel is just been amazing as far as a guy that stepped up his game. Not a guy I paid a lot of attention to during the regular season, and it's on me. Like, because he can throw. I mean, upper 90s fastball, wicked slider. It's a guy you can trust in games. So, but that, as you saw, the Braves didn't pitch poorly at all.
No.
I mean, Strider pitched great, and he hung 2 sliders. They should have been hit, but the fastball that Castellanos hit, I just looked at it. It's the only 100-mile-an-hour fastball or higher in Strider's entire career that was hit for an extra base hit in his entire career. So it's a good pitch. He rose to the occasion. Great hitter, and that lineup has been there. They're patient. They're motivated. I like the team overall. I think they're a really good team that seems to be gelling. And again, proof that you saw this during the regular season. Everybody knew they had that talent, but to come through and click at the right time. Ranger Suarez was freaking great yesterday. So, hats off to them. They're a solid team. They're going to be a tough out. They may have the best chance at winning the whole thing.
Well, you mentioned that, and FanDuel Sportsbook does seem to agree. Right now, the Phillies are minus 166 to advance out of the NLCS against Diamondbacks. So who you got advancing from this side of the bracket here, Rob?
I have to go with the Phillies. Again, the D-backs have played really well, not overlooking them, but I don't see many weaknesses with the Phillies right now. Like, they're good. They may be the best team, period.
And I think it's a combination of the fact they have that pitching and the offense. Like, let's say we get funky Aaron Nola, which occasionally does pop up. If we get funky Aaron Nola, they can still win that game because the offense is so good.
Yeah, and they can go to the bullpen early. And they still, yesterday they went to the bullpen fairly early. They still didn't pick. Like, Kerkering was sitting there. He could have come out. Hoffman could have come out. They have more arms. And that's a team with not a lot of weaknesses right now. During the regular season, maybe you saw some, but maybe they just weren't as focused and they came together. They know what it takes to win. You don't have to win during the regular season to win the whole thing. I think them and the Astros have the deepest teams. It'll be a great World Series to play off against each other. But who knows? Like, it's the postseason. Anything could happen.
I love it. Well, we've got the Astros and the Phillies advancing here from the 2 championship series. It is going to be fun to watch, and I'm excited to see just like fun players on all 4 teams in this postseason, not just pitchers like, Corbin Carroll. Like, give me more of that.
Love
it. As much as I can get of that, I want that for the rest of this year. That is Rob Friedman. Check him out on Twitter at Pitching Ninja. Find his work on Peacock, MLB on Fox, and of course right here at FanDuel Sportsbook as well. Rob, rest up. You got a couple days until Sunday to get those fingers ready. We'll talk to you again in the very near future.
Thanks, Jim.
All righty. Again, check out Rob here every Friday. Appreciate having him. Just to break down pitching matchups. It's a lot of fun to get additional insight before I make my hopefully not misguided bets on these series. We're going to dive in and close up shop with some NASCAR for Las Vegas in just 1 second. But first, snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, the NASCAR Cup Series and Xfinity Series are both in Las Vegas for this weekend. I had a couple of bets that I liked on the Cup Series side of things earlier on this week, but both those markets have since moved. The first one was a Daniel Suarez top 10. That was at plus 260. It's now down to plus 180. I've got fair market value in this one at almost exactly plus 180, so not seeing any more value there. If you did not bet Suarez earlier on, I'd hold off. You can still get a plus 260. I think there was a plus 275 out there earlier on. I would be intrigued by that, but plus 180 for Suarez at FanDuel is very much appropriate in my book. Other bet I liked earlier on this week was Chris Buescher, plus 136 against Christopher Bell. That's now down to plus 116. And I'll be honest, I do still show value there. So I think you could justify taking Buescher at plus 116. I think that is actually a fair bet, given how fast Buescher has been throughout the summer, and given the fact that Bell hasn't really popped on tracks like this so far this year. But the reason I'm a bit more nervous at plus 116 is that it's a Toyota. We're betting against a Toyota at a faster track, and that does make me uncomfortable. So I still show value there at plus 116 on Buescher. You could justify taking it, but personally, I'll probably hold off at that number if you hadn't gotten it earlier on this week. Do want to highlight a couple guys I'll be watching during practice on Saturday, though, in the hopes that maybe value opens up on them later on in the week. The two guys I'm most keyed in on are Eric Jones and Chase Elliott. Jones is 40-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I actually do show that as a value, but maybe I shouldn't, because I took him at 60-1 elsewhere earlier on this week because I showed a lot of value there. 40-1 is a decent amount shorter, and I think 41 is probably a good break-even point. But let's say, hypothetically, Jones is fast in practice and qualifying. My enthusiasm will spike for him in a hurry, and I don't think the betting odds for him will get super short, because we saw him in, I think, Texas. He had a very good car in practice, but then qualified 12th, and he still was 40-1 after qualifying there. So even if Jones does shorten, but he's super fast on Saturday, I would not be shocked if there were still value there. We'll talk about that in the betting guide on Sunday, FanDuel.com/research to find that. And I'll update that on Sunday morning to see if there's more value that opens up. But close eyes from me on Eric Jones. I am dead even with his top 10 bet at plus 155 at FanDuel Sportsbook. So interest there, but I think that he is in play for a win if he is fast in practice and qualified. Mention the other guy is Chase Elliott. Elliott right now at FanDuel Sportsbook is 16-1, and that's actually a value for me, a slight value though. I have Chase at 6.1% to win. His implied odds are 5.9%, so I'm actually a hair above him right now. And the reason I'm a bit surprised Elliott is this long is that he is in the Owners' Championship. His car is. He didn't advance in the Drivers' Championship, but he is still alive in the round of 8 in the Owners' side of things, and that's where all the money comes from, is the Owners' points. So for Rick Hendrick, he cares as much about Chase Elliott as he does about Kyle Larson and William Byron. So they're going to push. And Hendrick cars dominated this race back in the spring. William Byron and Kyle Larson, the two fastest cars there. Elliott was not as fast, but the speed for Elliott has been much better. I would say since the late summer on, he's been a lot better. I just kind of don't think books are viewing Elliott as being a playoff driver, even though he very obviously is. So Jones and Elliott, the two guys I'll be watching most closely on Saturday to see if they're fast. I would bet they're still good values over at FanDuel Sportsbook for Sunday's race. As for the Xfinity Series side of things, I only show value on one driver, and it's not a guy I want to bet. It's Riley Herbst at 40-1. I have 0.7 percentage points of value on him at that number. That's not enough for me to dive in. I'm going to hope, honestly, that John Hunter Nemechek is middling in practice so I can get a better number on him. Practice for them is on Friday, so hopefully he reopens longer than plus 180 because I want to bet him, just can't at that number. So might want to send this one out, but no value for me on the Xfinity Series side of things. That's all we got here for today here on Covering the Spread. Don't forget, though, Tom Vecchio is back with you tomorrow morning. He'll be breaking down player props for Sunday Night Football between the Bills and the Giants. Get that right here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed by subscribing. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Thank you to our two guests for today, JJ Zachariason and Rob Friedman. Find JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB and find Rob there at Pitching Ninja. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets across this weekend. We'll talk to you once again Monday to preview a very fun game between the Cowboys and the Chargers. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.